Hey y'all, welcome to LumberJillville. Women's wrestling lives here, and welcome to today's very first episode of Peculiar Plastics, where I take a look at some of the weirdest women's wrestling figures ever released. And boy, there have been tons. Now, I'm not necessarily covering the worst or which ones I think are terrible, but these ones are just weird. They're kind of out there, and there's many more videos we can do in the future, and we could cover the worst. But today we are going to start off covering some of the most weird JAKKS women's figures. Just bizarre, strange choices, weird figures, and I'm real excited to do this video. So if this is something you like, make sure to like the video. Let me know in the comments if we want to see more videos like this, and I would absolutely love to do them. So without further ado, let's dive into the very first, going back with the oldest in this countdown, weird JAKKS women's figure. Oh yeah, we are starting off with a bang, y'all, and this might be one of the weirdest women's wrestling figures ever made. Weird part reusage, weird choices with the sculpting, and also just a weird line, a weird series that this came from. Now, I did previously mention this is the oldest figure in this countdown. I don't know if that's true, because as you'll see the next figure I show you, I think it actually came out first, but they were both around the time of 1998, so I just really wanted to start the countdown with this because Jacqueline is at the top of my countdown of the most deserving and my most wanted woman to be released in the Mattel line, especially in Elite. I think Jacqueline is a pioneer. She's actually on my women's wrestling Mount Rushmore. So to have this abomination come out, it leaves a lot to be desired, y'all. A lot to be desired. Now, at least we did get a figure of her, but if you take a look at this figure and you cover up that signature, which we'll get to, can you tell that's Jacqueline Moore? Not at all. So starting off, this body is a complete reused body that we see on multiple Sable figures. We'll see it on the next figure in this list, but it was used quite a bit for Sable figures. So they just repurposed it for Jacqueline, changed the skin color, painted the attire differently, and then gave her a new head sculpt. Now, looking at this head sculpt, y'all, let's see if I break my camera. Look at that face. Look at that face. What is that? What is that? I mean, I don't even know what to say. The one good thing I can say is they did really good on the hair. The hair's cool. It's got like little streaks of different color in there, and it looks really nice. But that's about where the coolness ends. I mean, look at this face. Look at that face. I mean, what is that? I don't understand. Now, of course, this was way before the TrueFX face scan technology, and these were just sculpts, but holy moly, that has to be one of the worst faces ever. Now, the last weird thing I'm going to cover about it is this was in a signature series. And I think that's really bizarre that we have a wrestling figure with a signature on its leg and not a real signature from the wrestler. It's like a screen printed, reused, like replica signature, I guess you could say. And I always thought that was weird. I had her in my figure fed when I was younger, and it just looked weird having her signature on her leg. I think that's just bizarre. So yeah, this is definitely one of, if not the weirdest. Alright, so hear me out. I actually love that Jacqueline Moore figure, but it is all because of sentimental reasons. I got that figure when my mom was undergoing a very serious surgery when I was younger. My grandparents took me to KB Toys, and I picked out that Jacqueline. And yeah, it actually might be Mayor Aaron's very first women's wrestling figure, so I love that figure, even though it is a terrible, terrible figure, and it's so weird the choices they made. Now, moving on to the next figure, this one is more well-known, and boy, is it bizarre. Now, I know what y'all are thinking. That's not weird, Mayor Aaron. That's just Sable in a bikini. No. That's not what makes this weird, okay? You ready? You ready to see what makes it weird? It's morphin' time. This, my friends, this is what makes this figure so weird. Now, this Stomp series was weird its entire run. Earlier on in the series, they were kind of military, army type themed. And then this series, Series 3, was all about space. Now, let me ask you this. Who in the world would go to space dressed like this? I mean, look at her here. Now, everything you need to know is on the front of the package, where at the bottom corner, it actually says, sorry about it, Space Domination. Space Domination, y'all. Space Domination. And yes, to go with that theme, they gave Sable a whip. And that's an obsession that JAKKS had with Sable, as we'll see next on the list here. But yeah, Space Domination. Now let me ask you, who in the world would go to space like this? What do we got here? We have a left shin protected. We have a right whole leg protected. We have a whip, as mentioned before. And then we have a chest protector. I guess you got to protect the investments. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, it's super weird. The whole series was weird, but this one really stood out to me because it's like, who's going to space like this? I mean, what are we doing here? What are we doing here? And on top of that, now this figure was used a lot for Sable, but I mean, look at this face. This face is how I feel about this figure. Like, what? What? What's going on? I mean, 2 words for you. Space domination. I mean, how weird is that figure? On top of the weird theme of it, I mean, it's actually a horrifying figure if you look at it up close, as you just saw. So, yeah, we're going to move on right past that, but we are going to stay with Sable figures. Now, she has had quite a few weird ones. I wanted to put a lot on this countdown, but I'm only going to put a couple because I do plan on doing a Sable figure history here in a few weeks. So, yeah, the next one is not a terrible figure by any means, but it's the action feature that really makes it bizarre. Now, truthfully, I think this is a cool figure to have in my collection. I think it's very unique. It's got a lot of detail to it, especially for the time. And I do think Sable should get an Elite down the road. I think she was underrated for what she did for the women, but that's a whole nother story. But you can't take away from this figure being weird for a couple reasons. First reason is it is screwed to this base. It is screwed onto the base. Now, sure, you can take those screws out, and it could probably be a standalone action figure, but I think that's a little bizarre. I wish it just had peg holes. Another weird thing is, yes, she looks like the lead singer of an 80s hair metal band. Absolutely she does. I mean, look at that volume she's got going on there. That's a little weird. And the weirdest thing about this, which continues JAKKS' obsession with Sable and whips, we have a whipping motion, y'all. Hold on, let me adjust the camera here. It actually whips. Actually whips. And the worst part is, I don't think you can really take it out of her hand. So, yeah, we just have this Sable statue that whips. For what reason? No clue. No clue. But definitely weird. Whew. I mean, what is the obsession with these JAKKS figure designers and their love for Sable and whips? Okay, don't answer that. I really don't want to know the answer. But anyway, let's fast forward about 6 years to a very unique, very interesting Torrey Wilson figure. Alright, so this Torrey Wilson figure, I think it's awesome. Quite frankly, I think it's awesome. But again, this countdown's not about bad, not about terrible. It's about weird. And it doesn't get much more weird than Torrey Wilson dressed as Uncle Sam. Now, I know this is actually what she wore, and that's what this figure is depicting, the moment where she actually dressed up like this. And they do a pretty dang good job here with the detail and the design, and even the likeness of the face is pretty spot on. And JAKKS was known to be pretty terrible with capturing likenesses. So they did an excellent job here, but it doesn't take away that we have Torrey Wilson dressed as Uncle Sam as a figure. I think that's super bizarre, super weird, and I think what makes it really strange and bizarre is I think they put more effort into this figure as far as the details go, the attention to detail, than they ever put into any women's wrestling figure they released that was actually in wrestling gear. So, yeah. Now, in my opinion, that figure is the perfect example of one on this countdown that's weird, but it's not terrible. It's actually a cool figure, but it is super weird. Now, the next one is even weirder, and it is this woman's only figure ever released. May I present to you Dawn Marie's only figure ever released, period. And she's in a nurse outfit. Super weird. Once again, this was from a segment that actually happened. And JAKKS is big on focusing on those segments or those swimsuit competitions and making figures based off of them, which I thought was always weird, a little creepy, and boy, this is a weird figure. Now, once again, they put so much attention to detail in the attire. I mean, look at the little nurse's cap. Look at the skirt. Look at this red robe. The red robe is cool with the little sash that goes around and ties. And look at the rest of the attire. I mean, we even have a little medical cross on there, on the skirt. So they did a pretty fantastic job with details on this figure. But it's Dawn Marie dressed as a nurse? Like, who needed that? Who needed that figure? And Dawn Marie, she was a big staple in ECW. So it's a shame she never got an ECW figure. But it's also a shame that her only figure out there, her only figure that represents her time in wrestling, is her dressed as a nurse. How weird. Alright, so fun fact. Fast forward to 2017, and Dawn Marie actually became a certified nurse in real life. I mean, how ironic is that we got this figure a while back, her only figure, and fast forward to 2017, and she actually became a certified nurse. So that's super cool. Big shout out to her on that. And yeah, that doesn't take away with how weird and out of place this figure is. Now, here's the thing with JAKKS. When they were producing women's wrestling figures, a lot of them were sexualized, and a lot of the attires that they released them in were from swimsuit competitions or Diva Search segments. And there weren't a whole lot of women's wrestling figures released in wrestling attire. So that was a big problem with the JAKKS women's figures and why I really don't have too many of them. Now, getting away from the sexualization here, let's move on to this one, which it's a little debatable if it belongs in this countdown, but this is why. Alright, so I'm going to be honest with y'all. This figure terrifies me. It freaks me out. I mean, there's a reason why I have never displayed this out in the open in LumberJillville. A very good reason, and that reason is I like to sleep at night without having horrible nightmares, and this figure would do that. I mean, look at this face. It actually looks like Jason Voorhees' mom in the face, like spot on. Get her, Jason, get her. That's exactly what it looks like. I'm not even trying to be funny. It looks just like Jason Voorhees' mom. Now, overall, do I think it's a terrible figure? No, but once again, it's freaking weird. It's weird that we have a Moolah figure. Now, I know at the time this was released, this figure came out way back when. Not a whole lot of the details emerged as to what she did in the past. Just Google it. I'm not going to explain it here, but the fact that we have a figure of her is just weird. It just feels weird. And the last thing I'm going to cover about it is to give her I don't know how to say that, her older body. They actually put foam on the inside of her singlet to make it look like she has some extra weight. And I thought that's just super bizarre. Super bizarre here. Everything about this figure. Like, no joke, I cannot wait to get this figure out of my collection. Alright, so prime example. This is not a terrible figure by any means. I actually think they did a pretty darn good job here with the Moolah figure. But the problem is, it's a Moolah figure, right? I think everything that's came out way after this figure was released, everything that's came out, just, like, I feel gross. I feel gross having this figure in my collection, being such a big supporter of women's wrestlers and the progression of them and how hard they've worked to get to where they are. So that's why I added her on this countdown. Like, not a fan. Not a fan. And as a matter of fact, as soon as I'm done filming this, I'll probably put her up on the Edward Bay and sell her because I do not want her in my collection. Now, let's move on to a much more light-hearted figure, and it's actually an awesome figure, but still bizarre. I mean, it's a vampire woman. It's a vampire woman, and it's definitely unique. Now, do I think this figure rules? Abso-freaking-lutely this figure rules. This figure's awesome. This figure's great, but you can't take away from what makes it so bizarre. And I got two reasons for you. The fangs. She has fangs, y'all. She has fangs. We have a vampire lady that was on the shelves with all the other wrestling figures. And to me, that is bizarre. And of course, it doesn't stand. None of these JAKKS figures stand. I cannot stand the JAKKS women's figures. I just can't. I just can't. But yeah, this one definitely earns a place for being unique. It's almost more unique than weird, but I had to add it to this countdown because anytime I can find a reason to show this figure off, I have to because this figure is pretty dang cool. Now, I love that Ariel figure. Absolutely love it. Anyone that knows me knows that I'm hashtag Team Edward. That's a dated Twilight reference right there. But either way, I think that figure is spectacular. It's one of the best women's figures JAKKS ever made. But you can't take away with how weird it is. I mean, imagine a grandma taking their grandchild to a toy store and he wants a wrestling figure. Grandmama, I want a wrestling figure. Grandmama. And she takes him down the aisle and he's looking and there's John Cena. Oh, there's Randy Orton. Oh, that's Kane. He looks a little scary. There's a woman in a corset with vampire fangs. What? What? Yeah, so this is Maurice here. This is Maurice from the March 7th, 2008 edition of SmackDown, where she was actually a participant in the Diva swimsuit contest. I mean, how many wrestling figure fans, how many fans of wrestling at the time said, you know what? I need to have Maurice in her swimsuit from that contest. I need it in figure form. I need it. You know what? Nobody said that. Absolutely nobody wanted that. Nobody wanted this figure to be released like that. Super weird. Now, once again, things were different at the time. Things were different with the women and women's wrestling. But to have Maurice's figure, I believe this is her first figure to have it released from a swimsuit competition segment. I mean, it doesn't get much more weird than that, y'all. It doesn't get much more weird than that. And I think what's more weird than the figure itself is the designers that made choices to make these into figures. I think that's even weirder than the figure itself. So, yeah, I just had to throw it on here. I mean, it's kind of cool. I did a Maurice figure history, and it's kind of cool to see the evolution of her figures from this one all the way into her most recent figure release. It's pretty darn cool how far she came. But yeah, we have a Maurice from a swimsuit competition, y'all. What? So that Maurice figure is just one of many examples of JAKKS making a women's wrestling figure that has nothing to do with the wrestling at all and focuses on swimsuit competitions or diva search segments. And it's weird. Now, I know they didn't wrestle as much at the time and things were different for the women, but I just find it really weird, a little creepy, that there were so many of these women's wrestling figures released from these swimsuit segments and stuff. It's just bizarre to me. I think that's so strange, and I'm so glad that things have changed for the best. But yeah, super weird. Now, if you liked today's video, please let me know in the comments. Make sure to like the video and let me know what you want to see next. I have many videos planned in the future covering maybe some weird Mattel figures, maybe some more JAKKS figures, maybe some obscure women's wrestling items out there. And I think this series is where I want to do it. I think it'll be a lot of fun, and I had fun today. So, like I said, let me know in the comments if you did enjoy it, and I'll be sure to put these out. You know, sometimes there's big waits between women's wrestling figure reviews and releases, and this is one of those times. So I want to get content out to y'all. I want to give y'all some type of entertainment, something to watch, and something to show my passion and love to women's wrestling figures. So I really hope y'all liked it. Now, that being said, thanks for stopping by LumberJillville. Women's wrestling lives here. For a first look at all future women's wrestling figure reviews and women's wrestling related videos like today, Tongue Twister, make sure to hit subscribe and become an official resident of LJV today. Now, that being said, thank you for watching and have a great night, y'all.